Are people afraid to speak the truth about what happened with Jacob Blake and a relationship with the NBA? Are people afraid to speak the truth? Is there so much pressure to comply that people are afraid to tell the truth? Well, somebody has to be brave enough to tell the truth and to see it like it is. Let's take a look. If you were on the jury looking at the videotape, let's be honest, be perfectly honest. Don't take a perspective because you're black or African American, what perspective you are pressured to make. And don't make an opinion based on you being white in the perspective that you feel you have to make based on the pressure of your family or your race. All of us should be able to take an objective point of view while looking at the video. If this went to court and you were on the jury looking at that videotape, what would you honestly say? Pretend like for a moment you're neither black nor white, but you're looking at that video, taking an honest look at that video. Now, mind you, I'm not saying what actually happened because we weren't there. I wasn't there. You weren't there. So to hear what happened before the video, we don't know that. It's anything before the video is called hearsay. What the police say, what the people say, and of course you know they're going to always give more weight to what the police say about what was before the videotape or after the videotape. So if you were on the jury looking at that videotape, what could you honestly say about that videotape? Honestly, I mean really, forget being black, forget being white. What you see from the beginning of the videotape, you see someone resisting arrest. Now anything before that would be considered hearsay. People saying, oh, he was breaking up a fight. The police perhaps saying, no, he was a part of the fight. We don't know. All of that is hearsay. But sitting on a jury watching that videotape, what do you see? You see a person resisting arrest. That's what you see. And then you see a person trying to get away. Okay, walking, but nonetheless trying to get away from the police officers. Then you see the police officer pointing his gun at the back of the person walking away. Then you see the person going into his car, going down towards the floor or something of that nature, and the officer beginning to pull on his t-shirt, his tank top, and then starting to fire shots into his back. So what do you honestly gather from that? Like I said, from the beginning, you see someone resisting arrest. And according to law, that's wrong. Anything before the video is hearsay. What the people say, what the police say. Then you see the police officer with his gun drawn, pointing at the back of the person. The police officer is wrong for that, because he's pointing his gun at an unarmed person, taking deadly force, using deadly force in order to try to stop an unarmed man. But at that point he didn't shoot, but he was wrong for pointing a gun at an unarmed man. So that he should be charged for. He should be dealt with for that, disciplinary action or whatever. Then the man tries to go, Jacob Black, tries to go into his car. Now at that point, anyone watching the videotape, and especially law enforcement officers, they would feel like this guy is going for a weapon. So at that point, any officer would feel justified to start shooting the person if they don't stop proceeding, going into their car, going to the floor as if they're going to get a weapon. Even anyone not being a police officer, seeing someone go to their car, open the door, and start heading towards the floor, you think they're coming back with a stick, with a knife, with a gun, with some sort of weapon. That's what you would typically think. So, of course, now that was wrong on the part of Jacob Black. So the police officers or anyone watching the videotape would say at that given time the officer was justified for fear of his life to start shooting because he thinks that the guy is going for a weapon. All right, so we have wrongs on both sides. To be honest, I mean, we wouldn't want to have to say that, but to be honest, we have wrongs on both sides, which contributed towards the final outcome. So each one should be dealt with according to the wrongs that they have carried out. So the officer shouldn't go scot-free. Yes, he did deal with the matter wrong. And they should have tried to apprehend the person before him going to his car. So if you really thought he was going for a weapon, you should have tried to apprehend him and handcuff him prior to him reaching his car. Not waiting until he reaches his car and then you start firing shots into his back, as though you're actually waiting for him to get to his car so you can do what you would like to do. So then that's an argument of being premeditated, which no one can really go into the mind of the person to say that it was actually premeditated. But that's what it appears to have been based on that scenario, that they should have tried to apprehend him prior to him reaching his vehicle. All right, now what about the NBA? Well, with the NBA, with them having protests and boycotting to play the game of basketball, you have to understand initially they had the option of not going into the bubble because of them wanting to participate in the movement of Black Lives Matter. So that actually was a violation because they all agreed to go into the bubble, and if they wanted to participate in what was going on outside of the bubble, then they had the opportunity to not join into the play inside of the bubble. All right, that's on the one hand. So they violated that agreement between the owners and the players and the management to come into the bubble and play the game of basketball until they finish. This was an agreement that they breached. But let's look beyond that. Them playing in the NBA is just like you working on your job in a corporation. I don't care how big the corporation is or how small the corporation is, but you go to work. And then there are things happening in the society, social injustices, and you decide that you're not going to go to work and you're going to boycott. Everyone in the company is going to boycott. Now, doesn't that sound a little more strange? Doesn't it sound stranger now? Because the NBA is owned by owners. These are private owners of these different teams. So what fault of these owners is it that Jacob Black was killed? Did they kill Jacob Black? Did they support the killing of Jacob Black? So that's where we're dealing with another problem, that their job is to play basketball. And the National Basketball Association, the NBA, did the most that they could possibly do to allow them in a controlled situation because of the virus to be able to express their views from within the bubble through interviews, through slogans on their uniforms, giving them all of the possible ways of viewing their opinions while playing the game of basketball, because they opted in as opposed to being those who opted out to stay outside of the bubble to address the social issues. They found a way to allow them to address social issues in their interviews and on their uniforms and so forth. So them opting to boycott now is a breach of that agreement. And the owners and the management, what fault do they have for what's going on with the social injustices outside of the NBA? What part do they play? What role do they play? Now, granted, they're putting pressure on the owners to try to also put pressure on, the elected officials, the government, in order to make change. But the reality is the owners of the NBA and the management, they have nothing to do with those social injustices. In fact, they're trying to support the players to voice their opinion, to express their opinions while playing the game of basketball. So can you imagine working at a corporation, no matter how big or how small? Let's imagine it's a big corporation. And you say, after you hear some social injustice, someone being killed by officers outside of your company, you say, okay, we're not working today. We're not going to work until change is made. How are you blaming that company for the changes that have not been made? Now, of course, it would be nice if you can work with the owners and the management of that company to help further the cause of change. But just alone with the company trying to work with you, saying, okay, we're going to allow you to talk on television, we're going to allow you to wear slogans on your uniform to support the cause of changing or of change and changing the social injustices. We're going to do all that we can to support you with that. But go ahead and do your job. Do your job. And if you don't want to do your job, then don't come to work. You can stay out of the company, and we won't penalize you for staying out of the company. That's the NBA players that opted out. They won't lose, any pay, right? So those who opted to not come to the company to work, they said, okay, we support you. Don't come to work. We won't penalize you. Okay, you have that option. All right, but those who come to work, we want you to work. That's basically what the situation is with the NBA. So why are they doing this? This is the issue. This is the question. They're now as if they're blaming the owners and the management of the NBA for what's going on, the social injustices that are going on outside of the NBA. And they're punishing the owners and the sponsors who have advertisements. They're punishing them as a result of the social injustices that are going on in the society. So for that reason, since they made an agreement and opted in and didn't stay out as they had the opportunity to do so, by right they should go ahead and play the game and keep using their voice as they've been using their voice because they opted in and played the game. And they should at least have finished the series with the Los Angeles Lakers. They had at least maybe one more game to play to finish that first round. And if they wanted to take a break and get a message across, maybe that's possible. But the greatest fault here is that they opted in. They didn't have to come to the bubble. They opted in. And so they made a contract. And so they should fulfill that contract. They should fulfill that agreement that they made. And not put the blame on the owners or management for what's going on of the social injustices outside of the NBA, especially when the NBA has done all that they possibly could to support them in that. With the media and with the slogans on their clothes and all of these other things. They didn't have to opt in. They opted in, and there's a contract. So that's the biggest complaint that anyone could probably wage against the NBA players. Those who opted in should play the game. They had a contract and they opted in. They should play the game of basketball. And those who are outside of the bubble, they do what they can do. But putting pressure on the owners, penalizing and punishing the owners and the advertisers, the sponsors, because of the social injustices that are going on outside of the NBA, this in and of itself sounds like a case of injustice. So we have to stay right-minded and balanced-minded and understand what we're seeing and what is happening here. In fact, when it comes to the Los Angeles Lakers, they're actually giving the Trailblazers more time to rest, more time for Damian Lillard to get healthy again, which if they resume, it may give them a chance to possibly beat the Lakers when they come back to resume. They should at least have finished them off and then waited for the next series, the next round. But they didn't do that at this point. So this is the reality when it comes to what happened with Jacob Blake and the NBA. Unfortunately, because they seem to have no voice, they feel like, well, they have a voice, but they feel like they have no power. They're trying to now do things to force change by trying to force the hands of the owners and the sponsors to put pressure on the government and government officials and the police department to make change. But unfortunately, that's not the fault of the owners or of the sponsors. But because they feel themselves not empowered with the ability to make changes, they're using that as their platform for forcing change. And that's very sad. It's very sad for basketball fans. It's very sad for the owners of those teams. It's very sad for the sponsors who are sponsoring those players. So unfortunately, even though people feel like, well, it's a great cause. Yes, it is a great cause. But using the wrong means to justify change or to force change is also a case of injustice. So we have to be careful that we don't let our emotions get us carried away, to not know the proper way to make changes, and to respect our contracts and respect our agreements that we make with our employers and with the contractors, with the advertisers, with the sponsors. We made an agreement, and we're breaking that agreement. Like I said, all of them had the option to opt out, but they didn't. So why don't they respect the obligation that they made and to oblige themselves to complete that agreement, and then on their time off from work, do whatever they think they need to do with the money that they made or the money that they're going to make or whatever. But unless we can prove that it's the owners or one of the owners that is responsible for what's going on, or the sponsors who are supporting the negative things that are going on with the social injustice, then we are also just as wrong to penalize or to punish the owners and the sponsors of the National Basketball Association. All right? And that's the reality of what's going on with Jacob Black and the connection with the NBA right now. So it's very sad, because it looked like the Lakers had a good opportunity to perhaps win a title this year, and everything that's going on is starting to make that look slimmer and slimmer, dimmer and dimmer. So I hope that some people wake up and try to handle this the proper way. It's not a quick solution. It's not something that you can force, because even the owners, what power do they have? Even if they go to the police department and say, I want you to punish that officer, they're going to still have to go through a trial and decide whether they're innocent or guilty. So people thinking that the owners have all of this power, the basketball owners have all of this power, if it's not really enough facts to prove the guilt or the innocence of someone, then you're actually trying to force a case of injustice, because justice is done based on facts and witnesses. And without facts and witnesses, forcing someone's hand to do what you want them to do is also another type of case of injustice. We need to find out who was wrong and who was right and what should be done about it. Okay, thank you for watching, and I really hope for the best for the NBA players in the NBA, and for Black Lives Matter and the people who are being killed unjustly throughout the country. We need justice indeed, but we also need to handle it in a just way.